I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We are back on a Monday and we had so much fun doing by ourselves. We're doing it again. It is me and Dennis once again. I don't know what we said, but we must have said something to scare Matt away. Maybe it was the passion with which we were discussing our by ourselves. But wanted to say we are proud members of the Pigskin Podcast Network. You can find all the shows on the network at hashtag TPPN. Letters are tricky.
It's easy for you to say.
Dennis, how are you doing this?
Man, other than, we got the pool all wrapped up, ready to go yesterday, and then it's, we got a high of 60 today, so there'll be no pool for a few days. Work is busy. I'm having a ton of fun there, and looking forward to diving into some more buys and sells here. I'm in 5 John Bosch Fantasy Cares Eliminators right now. The final draft will start tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, I'll have 5 of those drafts going on all at one time. So, and I don't know if you've looked at the scoring for any of those, for all of those. It's insane. It's just totally crazy. It's like, it's. I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I'm just guessing. I mean, the scoring is so jacked up. Like, you get negative points for pass attempts, negative points for rush attempts. It's just weird. I don't get it. I haven't taken enough time, so I'm just using different strategies in every one, and hopefully one of them hits.
I'm pretty sure I would get negative points for my personal pass attempts as well. So I get that, but you're talking about 60 degrees as a high, being kind of a low mark for you. Right? We got to 60 degrees today for a high, and it's never felt so good. We got a lot of snow. I think when we were on the show Friday, I mentioned it was starting to go. We ended up with nearly a foot of snow. So I have a lot of tree limbs that used to be in a tree that are now stacked up in my front yard. We did not see 40 degrees on Saturday. Barely saw 40 degrees yesterday. Today, it got into the mid-50s, but now big rainstorms coming. They said we may get more snow flurries. It's been fascinating. That was the first weekend after all the kids got out of school, and they're getting ready for the Air Force Academy graduation on Wednesday. I'm sure my friend who runs Falcon Stadium has got to be a little nervous.
So had your trees started to bud yet?
Oh, yeah. They were in full bloom. That's why they all came down. Yeah. No, it didn't kill them. It just was so heavy. It was a heavy wet snow, and it was the weight. They said 12 inch. This is probably exciting for everyone. 12 inches of snow produced 3.5 inches of water. Usually in the winter, they said something like 12 inches of snow produces 1/2 inch of water. So
wow.
It was a lot, having to go out in the middle of the night and shake your trees so that as much snow as possible could drop off the branches. It's been a fun time. Speaking of fun, Jadeveon Clowney back to the Browns. Does that make you excited?
He's largely not lived up to his hype coming out of college throughout his career. But what I will say is when the hype is you're going to be one of the best ever, and then you have a 10 or 12-year career of just being really, really good, I suppose that, he doesn't get the sack numbers that I think a lot of people thought he would coming out. But playing opposite of Myles Garrett and the Cleveland defense is coming around. We've got some great defensive backs. Deshaun Watson, I think, will put our offense in better position to score points. So I do like the signing. I think he's a good fit for the team. He definitely still has a lot left in the tank. From an IDP perspective, he's not one of the top guys you're looking at because he just doesn't get the sack and tackle numbers that you would be looking for an IDP producer. But from a football standpoint, I think it's a great move. It's great for him, and it's great for Cleveland.
Yep, Cleveland trying to get back in the postseason. Well, on Friday, if people were with us, your dumpster dive recommendation at wide receiver was Kenny Golladay, who you can't quit, who's there in New York. Yeah. I like to think that Brian Daboll listens to the show because shortly thereafter, he came out talking about how he would like Daniel Jones to just go out there and rip it. Was that music to your ears?
It was. I rostered Golladay in a few spots, and as somebody that I think could be that's probably my wide receiver 3. He has wide receiver 2 potential. He's a big wide receiver, deep downfield threat guy, red zone threat, can go up and get the ball. He doesn't get a ton of separation. And I've been throwing around the idea that how much separation is enough separation and how much separation just means a guy can't get open. And I think throughout his career, he's shown that he gets enough separation to be able to be good at contested catch. And there's definitely a difference between him and, say, someone like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who doesn't get separation either, but isn't good and doesn't get even enough to be good at contested catches in the NFL. So I like it. I hope Jones takes it to heart and is willing to have if he's willing to have a 15 interception season, he could end up with 30, 35 touchdowns just by being gutsy enough to go for it. And, he's got to get a little Jameis Winston in him and just believe his guy's going to win the battle. And Golladay is that guy. So I like it. I hope it comes to fruition. I don't hope he gets 15 interceptions, but you got to be willing to, I guess. That's my point.
Well, Golladay signed that massive free agent contract last year, and it didn't seem like they really knew how to or employed using him hardly at all. He was almost a non-factor, which was frustrating for those of us that have enjoyed his talent. I was excited to see where he'd land. I was kind of bummed about him landing in New York and even more bummed when I saw the way they did it. But let's hope, Brian Daboll definitely has run some up-tempo offenses. He was able to work with Josh Allen and turn him into, a premier quarterback in the NFL. So I have some hopes, too, that we're going to see a little bit of a bounce back. I think it'll clarify things, too, if the Giants can figure out who exactly they're trying to target. But it'd be nice. I know people that roster Golladay and roster Saquon Barkley and have for a few years. It would be nice to see them bounce up a little. New York has invested in its offensive line, so maybe that will help things as well. Well, as I said, we're going to move to some buy or sells. We're going to look at running backs, 4 running backs, 4 receivers today. All 4 of these running backs are currently going in the top 24, and that's why we thought it'd be interesting to take a look. The first one out of the gates is Antonio Gibson, coming into year 3 with the Washington Commanders. He's currently going as RB12 and 24 overall. All these ADPs come off of Fantasy Pros, which is a combination of, I think, about 5 different sites. Gibson, converted wide receiver, weren't sure what we were going to get, had a really phenomenal rookie year, kind of busted out. Last year came in with a whole lot of expectations, did okay, 258 carries, which was a lot, cracked 1,000 yards, just got to 1,037, only 7 TDs, came back a little bit in that territory, had 42 receptions, not terrible, but it seems like Washington has given a lot of indications that they don't plan on him being the guy back there. They worked real hard to get J.D. McKissic back. He actually flipped on a potential deal with Buffalo to come back. Then they drafted Brian Robinson Jr. When we had Chris Harris on, he mentioned he thought that might have been a sign that they're not intending to re-up Antonio Gibson when his contract expires in a couple of years. Do any of these things give you pause?
Well, I certainly think so. You know, they like McKissic as a pass catcher. Brian Robinson brings a 3-down skill set. And what we've heard reported is that Rivera and Turner think that Gibson left a lot of yards on the field because of his inexperience as a running back. So while he's a dynamic athlete, he's big, 6'2", 220, played wide receiver in college as well as a little bit of running back. This is really his first opportunity these last 2 years to be a full-time running back. And it may just be that this is as good as he's going to be at running back. And, you know, they want somebody that is more natural at it. Now, he's got over an 80% catch rate on passes. And that shows from being a wide receiver, though, how many of those were actually just dump offs and fairly easy plays. Who knows? But he did average 7 yards per reception. And so there may be an opportunity for him to take on more. If Robinson steps up, maybe Gibson takes on more of the receiving work from McKissic, because that may be a little more natural. At running back 12, though, and the 24th overall pick, I'm kind of hesitant to maybe go there. It's a little bit rich for me for somebody that all off season they've basically been telling us we just don't think he's quite good enough to be the guy. So we're gonna have a 3-headed backfield, and you know, he could get under 200 carries this year. Now, if his targets go up by 30 or 40, it probably won't matter, but that would mean then McKissic's targets are going to go down significantly. It's the balance of the great athletic ability and size and ability to be a 3-down back versus a guy in Brian Robinson that's may not as talented, may not be as gifted athletically, but because he's always played running back, he just has a better feel for things.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of my concern. You know, last year, I got an offer to trade Gibson for Josh Jacobs and 2 firsts, and I ended up taking that deal, and I feel a lot better about it today than, you know, at the time I was like, man, he seems like a diamond in the rough. And if you're a dynasty player and you took him in a rookie draft, you probably got him late second or early third. You've gotten 2 years of an incredible return. This would be a great time to maybe flip him. And if you're not going to flip him, in some of the places where I've had him, and I'm not out on him necessarily, but I have, if I've had an opportunity, grabbed a Brian Robinson just in case, because you never know. I think there are a lot of questions with the Commanders offense in general because they have a quarterback change. They added another wide receiver who knows exactly what the identity is going to be. I've loved what we've seen from Gibson, but I'm with you. I prior to the draft, I still had him borderline top 12, but post-draft and everything that they have coming out, I don't think that you can have him as a top 12 dynasty back right now.
Yeah, I think you're still going to have to probably take him if you want him late in that second round. And I just don't think I can go there. Looking at the Dynasty Nerds trade browser, which pulls actual trades from people who are in some of the more than 10,000 members in the Nerd Herd and Dynasty GM, that Antonio Gibson for David Montgomery. Straight up. I mean, here's my I think if I got last year's Montgomery, I'm thinking probably because he is the show. This year, though, I don't know that team just looks like it's going to be so bad.
He's also another guy that's on a contract. So, I mean, Gibson, you figure, has at least 2 more years from Washington in some kind of role. Montgomery, who knows where he ends up.
Isn't he? I think this is his 4th year.
This is his 4th year. He was a 2nd-round pick. This is a contract year.
Yeah.
So
Antonio Gibson for a random 22 first was one. What? Antonio Gibson for Zeke Elliott in a 23 second. I'd move him for that. I mean, I think Zeke is going to have a better year than him this year. Give me that 2nd round pick in next year's draft.
Yeah.
On top of it. I don't know. And I feel like Gibson is going to have to undergo a metamorphosis. Somebody's going to have to take a look at him and go, hey, we're going to let you go back to doing what you do best, which is catch the ball.
Yeah.
And run occasionally. Give him, 75 to 100 carries and 80 to 90 targets instead of 260 carries and 50 targets.
Yeah, which if they hadn't brought back McKissick, you'd feel better about. But I guess we will see how their offense shakes out.
Well, McKissick's getting up there. He's got to be, 28 now, somewhere in that range?
Somewhere. Well, another 3rd-year running back makes the list, and that's Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. He is currently going as RB24 and 56 overall. He came out, was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 1st round going into 2020, and that made him a very hot commodity in rookie drafts. In many places, he went 101 that year. Had a modest,
absolutely crazy.
He had a modest year 1, but definitely gave those who roster him pause in year 2. He was limited to 10 games because of injuries. Only had 119 carries, 517 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. 23 targets, 19 receptions, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So basically, he was averaging about 12 carries and 2 receptions a game, which is not what you were looking for when you originally took CEH this offseason. The Kansas City Chiefs signed Ronald Jones. He's only on a 1-year deal, but we have definitely seen him help shoulder a good chunk of rushing load. Dennis, how are you feeling about CEH?
I think this is going to be his best year. What we're buying is that on a team with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, Joe Burrow said that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire was the best player. Andy Reid saw enough of Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, enough in him to take him over DeAndre Swift, whom most people thought Reid was going to take in that 1st round. No Tyreek Hill. I think the offense could be more running back centric in 2022. He only had 23 targets in 10 games last year. By running back centric, I don't mean they're just going to pound it. And I think when they do pound it, I do think they're going to pound it with Ronald Jones. But I think Jones probably ends up with maybe 200 carries, a little under. So he's going to get some opportunity to grind it out. But I think Edwards-Hilaire is going to be the starter. He's going to, push for 70 targets. And he's going to end up in the 150 carry range, 180 carry range. I definitely like him over Ronald Jones, but you're going to have a couple games this year that Edwards-Hilaire lays an egg because Kansas City gets out to a big lead and they're trying to grind it away with Ronald Jones and Derek Gore. My biggest concern, he's heading into year 3 and he hasn't taken control of the job yet. They've given him every opportunity. I do think he'll be able to hold off Ronald Jones and he'll be the starter this year. If he stays healthy, I think he starts all 17 games. And like I said, 70 to 80 targets, 150 to 180 carries. He'll be a high-end RB2, I think.
So we saw a recent trade for him posted on Twitter that I pulled where somebody traded Clyde Edwards-Hilaire and got back Breece Hall, who's pretty much going 101 in all formats right now, and George Pickens. What do you think of that deal?
I probably am going to take the Breece Hall side. I think Hall is going to get a solid 60% share of the running back touches in New York. As much as I like Michael Carter, it will be a timeshare, but it's going to be weighted to one side, 60-40, 65-35. I like Pickens' ability, and we've talked before about Pittsburgh's ability to identify and develop wide receivers. I think Pickens is going to become a good friend of Kenny Pickett. He's a classic X receiver. I saw today some talk about moving Claypool into the big slot role. So you got Pickens and Deontay Johnson on the outside. I think those guys will be more productive, but it's definitely. I think I would want Clyde Edwards-Hilaire as my RB3 or RB4 on my team. I think Breece Hall will get enough volume to be an RB2.
Yeah, and I would definitely take that trade. I'm less bullish on CEH than you. He never really lived up to probably the hype going into the first wave of rookie drafts, which was inarguably too high.
Right.
As people falling in love with Kansas City. And that's been my hesitation, honestly, this year a little bit with a James Cook and a Sky Moore, as we've seen them kind of rising up, because sometimes the opportunity looks great. You don't know how they're going to end up being used. You're right. Andy Reid saw enough in him that he took him where he took him in the draft. He also saw enough out of him in 2 years that he was happy to go sign Ronald Jones. He was happy to use Darrell Williams for significant time last year. In those roles, and you're possibly right about 100, 170, 180 carries, 70 targets. I think he could get there. I don't know how efficient he's going to be on that. RB2 would be, to me, his ceiling. I feel safer, kind of like you said, if he was your RB3 or 4. But if you can find a true believer that still thinks he's our fringe RB1, I'm moving him in a heartbeat.
So let me ask you this, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire or Antonio Gibson?
I'd take Gibson.
Yeah. I think I would too.
All right. Well, from two guys who have questions to a guy who really improved his fortunes in 2021, and that is James Conner. He moved to the Arizona Cardinals last year on a 1-year prove-it deal after a 4-year rookie contract in Pittsburgh, where he had some high highs but struggled to stay on the field. And he had a phenomenal 2021. He is now currently going as RB21. 41 overall. Last year, he really only 752 rushing yards, but he had 15 rushing touchdowns. He also caught 37 passes for 3 additional touchdowns, 375 yards receiving. But even better, this offseason, while Chase Edmonds moved to Miami, James Conner got a brand new 3-year deal and does not have a lot of competition. So how are you feeling about James Conner these days?
Is that Eno Benjamin slander I'm hearing from you?
I'd take Keontae Ingram over Eno Benjamin.
Jonathan Ward dismissiveness.
Jalen Samuels reticence.
Now, here's what I'm buying. He heads into the season as the RB1 in Arizona. James Conner is a red zone monster with 3-down capability. Is he, J.D. McKissick in the passing game? No, but he's a good pass protector, and he's a capable pass catcher. My concerns are that he tends to get slowed down by injuries. He's one of these tough guys that gets dinged up, and he plays through it, and he loses some effectiveness. Another concern is that Arizona is a pass-first team. They're going to be without DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games, but they went out and got Marquis Brown. They've got Zach Ertz. Antoine Wesley, who came on last year. I think they got did they bring AJ Green back officially, or the ghost of him?
They did indeed bring AJ Green back officially. They have Rondale Moore somewhere out there. So they drafted Trey McBride. Max Williams still exists.
So it's going to be Conner in the running game until he inevitably breaks down. Could he not break down? Sure, he could not break down, but I think from what we've seen throughout his career, part of the reason he was so successful last year was that he had Chase Edmonds to split time with. Edmonds was a capable runner between the tackles. And so whoever is spelling James Conner this season is going to have to be able to carry some of the load on the ground as well. So it may bode well for Keontae Ingram, who is a bigger back. He's bigger than Ward, I believe, and Eno Benjamin. But man, I don't know if I can go there as running back 15, pick 39. It's what, third or fourth pick into the fourth round. It might be just a little bit too rich for me. I want to, but I probably have two running backs at that point. And if I'm looking in Superflex, I'm probably definitely early in the fourth round, taking a look at quarterback, couple running backs. And then I kind of like the elite tight end build. So I probably wouldn't be looking at another running back until maybe the fifth round. I might go running backs in 5 and 6 even and get me one elite quarterback, one elite tight end, and two top end running backs, and then add a couple more just so I have that depth, and then slam about 8 rounds worth of wide receiver. I see Connor going on the trade browser for a 23 first.
Yeah, and I'm doing that probably all day because James Conner was a 0 RB savior last year.
He was,
a guy you got, and that, but part of me has to feel, as much as I have enjoyed James Conner, and I had him, because I had a lot of shares of Le'Veon Bell. I had him behind Bell, and he was a serviceable fill-in. Injuries are a concern. We saw him even get banged up a little bit last year, but I have to feel like last year's performance was just about his peak, and it was insane touchdown numbers. I mean, 18 touchdowns. We've seen that from people before, have an explosive touchdown season that is really hard to recapture. If you were looking at the rest of his stats, 752 yards rushing on 200 carries, that's not a great per rush average. Receptions will help. PPR will help. I think he'll have a decent RB2 season, but I'm trying to capitalize on the hype right now.
Yeah. Another trade in here, James Conner for AJ Dillon and Romeo Doubs.
I'm still keeping Conner because I'm not an AJ Dillon believer. I'm sorry.
Man, I'm coming around on him. In a standard league startup I did earlier this year, I took Dillon as my RB2.
I just feel like he's all hat and no cattle.
Yeah, well, he's carrying some beef there. I don't know if you've seen those thighs.
I have indeed. Well, the last of our running backs is another guy who's going still insanely high and has a track record to kind of prove it, and that is Alvin Kamara. He is currently going as RB11, 18 overall, which is probably a little lower than he's gone in years past. He had another solid season last year, carried the ball 240 times, which was by far a career best. Got almost 900 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. Only had 47 receptions and 67 targets. It was the first time in his career he's had less than 81 receptions. It's because he missed some time. He was limited to 13 games and 10 starts, and also was more of a rusher in that offense. I think the hesitation for a lot of people comes from the potential off-the-field issues. For those that aren't aware, he was arrested just before the Pro Bowl in Las Vegas and still faces some adjudication for that. So that combined with age and a possibly shifting New Orleans offense, how are you feeling about Alvin Kamara these days?
Man, I can't buy in at RB11. Pick number 18. I don't know. So I think sometimes one of the things I forget about Alvin Kamara is that he's 5'11 and 215, which is ball carrier size, but he's got pass catcher receiving skills. So he does have the frame to be able to carry the load, but he didn't do it in college, and he didn't do it in New Orleans until last year when he had 240 carries, but he wasn't terribly efficient, only 3.7 yards per carry. He had 67 targets. I mean, that 240 carries was more than 50 carries over his career high prior to last year. I know they brought Mark Ingram back to kind of handle some of that early down grind. I think Abram Smith, who profiles as a more athletic Mark Ingram, they signed him as a free agent. He could potentially come in and grind some out. Dwayne Washington and Tony Jones, I think, are core special team kind of guys. And Abram Smith, I think, after playing linebacker several seasons in college before switching to running back, will probably spend most of his career as a core special teamer as well. But I just don't know if I'm ready for 275, 280 carries for Alvin Kamara. At 240 carries, he missed 4 games last year. And, that's a little bit rough. He dropped from 83 to 47 receptions and went from 187 to 240 carries. What he has going for him is I don't think Ingram, Jones, Smith, and Washington are really a threat to his touches. If he wants the ball, he's going to get the ball. And the QB situation is settled there after the whole you can plug your ears here, Taysom Hill experiment.
Yeah, I mean, if Jameis stays out there, and I actually think even if they end up having to go to Andy Dalton, we've seen him use running backs. We've seen him as a capable passer. When it comes to looking at trades, I agree with you. I would probably hesitate in a startup to take him there. I think that ADP is still a little bit too high. If you're in a trade scenario, if I have him, I'm probably not liking any of the offers I'm getting right now because people are trying to buy low on the uncertainty. However, if you don't have him and you find somebody in your league who's panicking and you can buy low due to the uncertainty, I still think it's worth a swing. If you look at his career numbers, it seems like every other year he's had a explosive double-digit touchdown output, and that would be due in 2022. And if you can start getting on one of those grooves and get him have a couple of explosive games, provided he doesn't get some kind of a suspension, that might be an ideal time to maximize on his value.
All right, let me throw a couple trades at you. Alvin Kamara, straight up for Travis Etienne.
Hell no.
Super flex. Still super flex. Alvin Kamara, straight up for Cam Akers.
No, I probably wouldn't. I'm not a big Cam Akers truther, though. If you were, there are a lot of people that think he's going to rocket ship to the top 12. If you thought that wouldn't be that bad.
So coming out, I had Akers as my 5, and then after at RB4 and Edwards-Hilaire at 5, and after Edwards-Hilaire landed in KC, he moved up to 4, so they just flipped. J.K. Dobbins and a 22-second for Alvin Kamara and a 22-4.
Yeah, I would probably do that.
Yeah, I like the Dobbins side on that.
I think Dobbins actually has a legitimate shot to rocket ship up. He's in a good rushing offense. And to me, you're buying him on a little bit of a discount because of that ACL tear.
Yeah. How about Alvin Kamara straight up for Courtland Sutton?
I guess it really depends on my roster there. I think Courtland Sutton's in for a good year. He's still the receiver I think is the best in Denver, and I'm higher on him probably than some other people have been for a while. If I needed a wide receiver and was set at running back, I would, but it's hard when you see those trades across position because it really depends on your league and your makeup. Like I'm in one league where we start one running back and play 3 wide receivers, and it's 16 teams. I would probably do that because wide receiver is a much more of a premium.
Yeah.
Speaking of wide receivers, we're going to turn the page, and the first one we are going to get to is the shiny new weapon for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, and that is Amari Cooper. He is going currently as wide receiver 18, 47 overall. Kind of shows you how quickly running backs are moving in a lot of the drafts right now. Cooper has played 8 seasons. Wait, 7 seasons? Yeah, because it doubles it out. 7 seasons, 3.5 with the Raiders, 3.5 with the Dallas Cowboys. Was a pretty big factor for Dallas. Saw 429 targets, got 292 receptions, 3,893 yards, and 27 touchdowns in his partnership with Dak Prescott. Now he gets Deshaun Watson, and he is pretty much the predominant game in town in Cleveland. They let go of Austin Hooper. They have your sleeper tight end and David Njoku there. Behind Cooper at wide receiver, they have Anthony Schwartz and Donovan Peoples-Jones currently. I'm sure there's other people because I'm not a Browns homer. But how are you feeling about Amari Cooper?
Well, here's what I'm buying when it comes to Amari Cooper. So pick 49. So that's the 501.
47.
Oh, okay. Did you update it?
No, 18 over 8 wide receiver, 18, 47 overall.
Oh, okay. Well, my bad. So that's the 411. So we're buying that he's the clear wide receiver 1 in Cleveland. Provided Watson plays 17 games, it's not a downgrade from Dak Prescott. It may be even a little bit of an upgrade. And he's got a great running game in Cleveland to provide balance and help open it up. One of the downsides that, we're selling, he's moving to a lower volume pass offense. Cleveland, they're just not going to throw the ball as much as Dallas. I guess is it out of the question that they do? No, but probability-wise, they're not going to throw the ball as much as Dallas. And if he's so great, why is he on his third team? Is he the new Brandon Cooks? Is that what's going to happen? He's going to play a couple years in a whole bunch of different stops and just keep putting up 1,000-yard seasons, though he didn't put up 1,000 yards last year. I like the player a lot. I'm probably not in the 4th round. In a startup and super flex startup, I'm probably not starting on wide receiver until the 6th round or maybe even the 7th round, unless I'm taking one of the elite guys, Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or CD Lamb. If I'm taking somebody in that range, Amari, that's not where he's at in his career. He's somebody I definitely would love to have as, my RB2 or wide receiver 2 or 3. I think he's going to put up a lot of points, but we have seen him disappear in the past and go a couple games being a complete non-factor. So while he brings a lot to the table for Cleveland, it's definitely going to be maybe a little bit of a roller coaster ride between his tendency to occasionally disappear and Cleveland's, ability to sometimes just run the ball down people's throats.
Yeah, I like Cooper. I've always liked Cooper. I do think he is a solid wide receiver.
Like him even though he's not on Dallas anymore?
Yeah, it wasn't just because I actually first started trading from when he was on the Raiders, which tells you how much I liked him. I feel like he's still going to be a solid wide receiver too, but I like him a little bit lower in the wide receiver too. I'd feel better if his ADP was telling me he was wide receiver 21. 18 feels a touch high. But I think it's right on value, which makes him a real difficult asset. I don't think you can get a good deal in trading for him or get a lot trading him away right now. You probably have to see that's another situation too, where there's a lot of uncertainty. I'd be curious if you have any cool trades you pulled up with.
So a lot of them are, okay, let's see. Cooper for 22 first.
I guess that's the question there for me would be, are you rebuilding?
Right.
Because if you're competing, I think I'd rather have Amari Cooper, a known quantity in what could be a good offense. If you're rebuilding, you take the younger player.
Well, and I'd like to know where that first is.
I mean, either way, I think you're pretty much getting one of these wide receivers, unless I doubt anyone's trading a top end first round pick for him.
Right. And so you're looking at, is it Christian Watson for Amari Cooper or Sky Moore for Amari Cooper? Is it that range? If it's Drake London, Garrett Wilson, I'm probably wanting London or Wilson. Let's see, where was that other one? Amari Cooper and Alan Lazard for a 24 first and a 24 second.
I'm keeping the receivers because Alan Lazard's probably going to return decent value too. When you go more than the next draft out, that's we love to play Dynasty forever, but you can't be 100% sure.
Well, I guess to me, if I can convince who I'm trading with that 24 first is valuable because of the class. I mean, in 23, I can trade for 24 first and get a first back. But if I can trade a 24 first to get a premium player, I'm all about it.
Oh, it's good if you're trading the picks. I'm just saying if I had the receivers, I'm not doing that.
So Deontay Johnson for Amari Cooper and Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
I would probably do that. I like Deontay Johnson better. But there's another one where I forgot until Matt pointed out he's in a contract year too. If Pittsburgh doesn't re-sign him, does he end up in a Kenny Golladay situation?
Yeah, sometimes it can get scary when they go to a new team.
Mm-hmm. Well, one wide receiver who didn't end up changing teams is our next guy, which is Mike Williams. He ends up re-signing with the Chargers for a nice little long-term deal. He is currently going as wide receiver 23 and 60th overall. He has played with the Chargers for all 5 of his professional seasons. Last year in a new scheme and a new system was by far his best. Saw 129 targets, got 76 receptions for 1,146 yards and 9 touchdowns. He gets to keep rolling with Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert. How are you feeling about Mike Williams these days?
I love Mike Williams. He is currently 27, so he's entering what should be his real peak years. And my concern is that if that team gets grooving with the running game or passing to the backs, the volume that Keenan Allen gets could hamper him, and he could end up with what is a good season at 49 catches for 1,000 yards that he had back in 2019. But it limits, the volume there. Only 90 targets versus 129 targets last season in 16 games. He's a big guy. We're buying. He's got a clear role in the LA offense. He's the outside receiver. He's the downfield guy. He's 6'3", 6'4", 225 pounds. He's put up big yards and big TDs with Keenan Allen healthy. And I think he showed last year that he can do it. And Justin Herbert is a guy that the Chargers believe in to move that offense through the air. He has had some consistency issues in the past, and the team does have a lot of weapons with Eckler and Keenan Allen. They drafted Isaiah Spiller, who's, despite his poor athletic testing, is a pretty good running back. So they've got weapons there. Jalen Guyton, Josh Palmer came on last year. And when Williams was out, Josh Palmer stepped right into his role and looked good doing it. So they do have some weapons. Wide receiver 23, 60 overall. So that's the end of the 5th. I think that's if I'm drafting. And so how I like to build teams a lot of times and go running back early, elite tight end, elite quarterback. I feel like there's a better wide receiver I'm going to get at 60. I'm probably looking more for, Deontay Johnson, a Michael Pittman Jr., than I am for Mike Williams. I'm probably more comfortable with Williams as my wide receiver 2. So if he was to drop to me in the next round, I'd be perfectly happy going Pittman, Williams back to back.
Yeah, and I guess my concern about Mike Williams is what is his usage going to be? Because at that price, it feels like you're really buying the boom. And we saw the boom early on. There was a lot of talk that they wanted him, Joe Lombardi came over to be the offensive coordinator, that they wanted Mike Williams to be that Michael Thomas from the peak of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And, he had 12, 10, and 9 targets first 3 games out of the gate, had a 16-target game in week 5 in this back-and-forth shootout. He also had 9 games where he had 7 targets or less. And he only had 3 touchdowns after week 5. So you had a lot of kind of games where you were relying on Mike Williams, where he got you 2 for 27, 2 for 19, 2 for 58, 4 for 33, 5 for 97 and touchdowns good, but then 4 for 39, 6 for 61, 3 for 49, 3 for 63 gets you a touchdown, kind of bails it out. But it's like what you said, Keenan Allen, I think, is the far more reliably consistent producer. Mike Williams has some high highs, but then you have to ride through a myriad of like 5 to 10 point games. And at wide receiver 23, where you're hoping to put in a wide receiver that's going to boom for you, it didn't happen quite enough for me at that price point. I like him better if he was my wide receiver 3.
Yeah, he's, consistency is his Achilles heel. So what do you think about this? Mike Williams in a 23-4. This is Superflex for Aaron Jones.
I mean, I'd probably take Aaron Jones. I feel like Aaron Jones might be in for Le'Veon Bell type usage. It also depends, again, on structure and format of a league. But
Mike Williams or Devonta Smith?
I'm probably sticking with Mike Williams. I trust the Chargers offense a little bit more, and Devonta Smith is not the number 1 for Philly. He may end up being the number 3 or 4 option because I still think Goddard, they like him, and obviously A.J. Brown.
Mike Williams or Michael Thomas?
I'm going to take Williams. I don't know what we get in Thomas.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty there. So last one, Mike Williams. Oh, that's not a good one. Or a second round pick. Mike Williams or 22 first?
I mean, to me, are you competing or are you rebuilding?
Right.
That'd be my same argument because I think Mike Williams is a playable player every week. And if you're competing, he's going to have some weeks that he wins you. He's just going to have some weeks where, he doesn't help you that much. All right. Well, our next wide receiver is another guy who sometimes has been boom bust, and that's Marquise Brown. He was traded this offseason from the Baltimore Ravens to the Arizona Cardinals, where he pairs with his former college teammate, Kyler Murray. He's currently going as wide receiver 28 and 63 overall. I still don't know how some of this math works. It's kind of fascinating. But last year, he did have a career year with Baltimore. It was year 3 for him. He's going into year 4. They've already picked up the 5th-year option, so he knows he has at least 2 years in the desert. But last year, he saw 146 targets, caught 91 passes, first 1,000-yard season, 1,008 yards, and 6 TDs. He was kind of known as a big deep ball player in years past, had his lowest yards per reception, but again, had a lot more receptions, seemed to be turning into a more reliable receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is there, 6-game suspension. He reteams with a player that he has played with in the past. How are you feeling about Hollywood Brown?
I'm torn, in part because of the Hopkins suspension. How many games did Lamar Jackson miss last year?
That is a good question.
Because I wonder, I'd be curious to see what
Lamar Jackson played 12 games last year. So yes, he missed 5. Huntley started 4. Josh Johnson started 1.
I'd be curious what the split was in and out with Jackson. Did he get fewer opportunities? But so you're right. He is teamed with his college quarterback. He's an explosive playmaker that Arizona has been lacking. There's no Hopkins for the first 6 games. here's kind of where I'm at with it. I think he's going to come out of the gate hot. Him and Murray want to prove that they've got it going on, that they're explosive, and they're going to come out and try to light it up. But I think in Game 7, when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, there's going to be a little bit of pressure to get the ball back to him. He is not going to go quietly into the night. He thinks he's still the man. He's the alpha on that team. His game and Marquise Brown's game could not be more different. So I do think there's room for both of them. My concern is that Hollywood ends up being relegated to just being a deep threat in the second half of the year. I'm probably hoping for that smoking hot start, and then I'm going to sell as absolutely high as I can after like week 5. And if I can, especially if I'm not competing, I'm like going to try to get a king's ransom for Hollywood Brown. I think I said earlier when we were talking about rankings earlier in the year, I expect Hollywood Brown to be like pushing for low RB1 status to start the season, but then drop back after Brown comes back and be more into the low wide receiver 2, not RB1, wide receiver 1. And he'll drop back 6 or 8 spots by the time the season is over because he'll have an alpha that's taken opportunities away from him.
Yeah, I guess we'll see about that. I think Hopkins started to trail off a little bit last year. I'm curious if that was injuries, if that was inefficiency. You are correct looking at the game log for Marquis Brown. He remained pretty solid in targets, but he did not have any touchdowns after week 7. So the back 5 games of the season were probably some of his lowest fantasy outputs. He had 5 for 41 in week 13, 10 catches, but only 43 yards in week 14 against Green Bay, 5 for 44 in week 15, 3 for 28 in week 16, and 3 for 27 in week 17. So he probably cooled a little bit as he was coming down. Be curious to see if he gets consistent play, although that might make him the perfect Cardinals player, hot out of the gate, non-existent when it matters most in November and December.
Right. He's going to fit right in.
I feel like his ADP and everything is starting to rise, though, after the trade. I don't think people were incredibly high on Baltimore because a lot of people thought Bateman would take a step forward, which presumably he will. So I'll be curious to see if his ADP keeps going up now that he's back in Arizona.
So how about this trade? Marquise Brown for Tim Patrick and a 22 third.
I'm taking Brown. I mean, I love me some Tim Patrick, but that feels like a bargain basement.
I'm like, how the hell did that even get accepted? Marquise Brown for James Conner.
That probably depends on roster build, but I actually would probably prefer Brown because I think he's younger and a more, more fungible
he's got
position.
More games in front of him. Marquise Brown or a 22 first.
That I might do whether I was competing or rebuilding because especially if it's a higher end, some of these younger wide receivers. I mean, that's really the question Arizona faced, right? Was do we take one of these young receivers at pick 23 or do we go get Marquise Brown? And they opted to take the veteran who they presume has chemistry, but I might actually opt to take one of the younger guys.
How about this one? This is going to be a smash accept. Marquise Brown for a 23 first and Elijah Moore.
My God. I mean, definitely taking the first and more because I actually have more a little bit higher than Hollywood Brown in my Dynasty rankings to begin with.
Yeah, that one I'd be smashing accept on.
All right, well, our last player we saved probably the most interesting and controversial for last, and that is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley has top 5 talent, but is nowhere to be seen most of last year and will be suspended for the entirety of the 2022 season. So these are kind of future picks. Currently, his ADP is still wide receiver 80 and 200 overall. Not only do people have questions, obviously we're not going to see him this year. People have questions about what we are going to see in the future or if he'll even be with the team. There were rumblings that Atlanta was looking to move on from him before this suspension came down. We've seen him be really, really good, but it's been a couple of years. How do you feel about Calvin Ridley?
I mean, when he was suspended, he was the unquestioned wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. And barring suspension, he'd still be the unquestioned wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. Now we're looking at he's going to be almost 29 when he returns from suspension. He missed a bunch of games in 2021. He's going to miss all of 2022. The Falcons are in a rebuild. As soon as they can, I think they're going to trade him. I think they're going to move on. They may even cut him just to say, let's get out from under. You go here. We're going to you gave us 3 really good years. Go take care of your own business. Find you some place to play. We're heading in another direction. I'm not sure what the dead money will look like at that point. But I'm not looking to acquire him just because I don't know. He could get Kenny Golladay in the New York Giants. He could go somewhere that, he still doesn't fit in, or he goes somewhere that's got 2 really good receivers already. And, if he was to land in, LA with either Los Angeles team, what's his volume going to be there at 29 years old, joining a new team? There'll be opportunities. He could go, he could get traded to Chicago that maybe they go out and win 5 games this year and they show some growth. And it looks like they're moving in the right direction, and they need to add a good wide receiver, and you can add Ridley cheap. I don't know. Maybe that's something that goes on. I don't know. I think I'm probably out on him, though, even at wide receiver 80.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to know. So there's 2 situations where you're looking at potentially acquiring him. One where you have a really good team and you can afford to have a player sit on your bench, because most leagues do not allow you to put a suspended player on IR or on a holding. So you basically have to roll through an entire season with a dead bench spot, which is tough, especially in Dynasty where you're already carrying a certain amount of prospect players usually that you're not expecting a big return from. The other place I could see is if you are a team that's in the midst of a rebuild and you're not really going to be competing anyway, having a player like that on your bench probably isn't doing a big disservice. And it depends on what you can get him for. I took him in a startup where he was my wide receiver 7, I believe. I got him after the 12th round. That seemed like a decent place for me to grab him. On the flip side, if you have him and you had paid a premium to get him, I'm probably holding on to him right now. I mean, this bit me in the backside with Le'Veon Bell, but at this point in time, I just can't stomach trading somebody that I've seen be a top 5 receiver for the offers that are coming in right now for wish streams, because that's what people are offering you. Basically, they're sending you their buy low wish streams.
You wouldn't trade him for Darrell Henderson in a 23 third?
No, Darrell Henderson may not even be on a team next. He's another guy in that contract year. That's like a 1-year rental.
Yeah, he's going to be replaced by Kyron Williams.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just the model
the
Rams are using now. They've decided they do it with safety. We're going to draft you when it's regardless of how good you are. When it's time for a new contract, you got to go.
Have you seen are there any other interesting trades?
I mean, Ridley and Elijah Moore for Saquon Barkley and Devin Duvernay.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, you have some upside and some risk. I actually probably would keep Ridley and Moore.
Yeah. Ridley for Desmond Ridder in Superflex.
really depends on how desperate you are for quarterbacks, but that feels like see, that's the thing. If Ridley doesn't really come back or he ends up in a horrendous situation, then you feel good about that. If he comes back and looks like what he looked like in 2020, that might be one of your life's deepest regrets. And that's where right now, Calvin Ridley, if it just does not feel like the prudent thing to trade him. It feels like exactly at the beginning of Le'Veon Bell's holdout.
Yeah, it's Calvin Ridley for Jarvis Landry and a 23 third.
I'm probably not doing that either because I don't. What is Landry's role going to be on that offense?
Slot receiver. You know, that's what he is. I mean, it can't be anything else, really.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Well, probably not the greatest one to end on, but there you go. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of the buy sells. Dennis and I are having fun tossing these out. We will be back with some kind of a show on Friday, and possibly all three of us, hopefully.
Hey, that article I talked about, the rookie quarterback class, dropped today over at dynastynerds.com. Go check out my thoughts on what this rookie QB class looks like to me.
Someday I'll be able to write another article again. It's been a rough couple of weeks. Well, here's to hoping we get back to sunnier weather by the time we see you on Friday. Until then, take it easy.
Right on.